The purpose of this podcast is to educate and inform. It is no substitute for professional care by your doctor or your qualified healthcare professional. Never disregard or delay professional medical advice because of something you've heard on this podcast or in any linked material. Guests who speak on this podcast express their own opinions, experience, and conclusions. Dr. Shirley neither endorses nor opposes any particular opinion discussed on this podcast. The views expressed on this podcast have no relation to those of any academic, hospital, practice, institution, or other entity with which Dr. Shirley may be affiliated.
Welcome to Forever Fab, the podcast on fashion, the art of living, and all things beauty. This podcast is curated by Dr. Shirley Madhere, MD, as the definitive source of holistic wellness through beauty.
Welcome to the Forever Fab podcast, the podcast dedicated to fashion, the art of living well, and all things beauty. I'm your host, Dr. Shirley Madhere, your purveyor of this definitive source of living a beautiful life. And this week's episode is dedicated to transformation. I am here with Michaela Angela Davis, and our topic today is Your Image is Your Signature, Style and Gender in the New Culture. Welcome, Michaela.
Thank you for having me.
Oh, thank you so much for saying yes. Michaela Angela Davis is a writer, stylist, mentor, image activist, so much more. I don't think I could find the words to explain how an amazing Wonder Woman that she is, but I'll tell you a little bit about her. From an early age, she was a student of the arts, and that included acting. She began her studies at the Duke Ellington School, right?
Yeah,
Duke Ellington School of the Arts in Washington, D.C. as a National Arts Scholar, and then went to college at New York University. She also studied at the Stella Adler Acting Conservatory and the Alvin Ailey American Dance Theater. After completing her studies, Michaela went to work in 1991 for Essence Magazine, the inimitable Essence Magazine, as an associate fashion editor, and has styled a number of celebrities and high-profile individuals. She was the founding fashion director for F.A.B magazine, and she was the last editor-in-chief of Honey magazine, which I loved. I love
Honey, too.
I know it remains in spirit. It does. Michaela went on to become the chief creative consultant and editorial brand manager for the rebranding of Black Entertainment Television, or BET, and she's been featured in documentary films and serves on the board of Black Girls Rock, Imagination, and the Brooklyn Community Arts and Media High School. Michaela, on top of that, is involved in some incredible projects, which I hope we'll talk about later, and serves her community by mentoring women of all tribes. Michaela has won many prestigious awards, including Phenomenal Woman, Trailblazer Award, and 2 Empowerment Awards, and she's also won my heart. So welcome again, Michaela, and thank you for being here.
Oh, it's my pleasure.
You are pretty phenomenal. So let's dig a little bit deeper into your past. You were born in Germany, is that right?
Yes.
But raised in Washington, D.C. in America.
Yes.
But you were named after an Italian. Explain.
Yes. So my father was in the military, so that's the Germany part.
Yes.
While in Germany and pregnant with me, my mother was at the Sistine Chapel and was enamored with Michelangelo and decided that she would name me that if I were a boy, which she thought she would because there were 2 girls already and 1 boy, and I would have evened it out.
Yes.
But alas, here I am, and so she named me after Michelangelo, but it has become very useful because most people think I'm named after Angela Davis or I'm Angela Davis's daughter. So let me get this straight. I get that so much. Oh, I love your mother. I'm like, I do too. So while she is my soul sister,
yes,
Angela Davis is not my mother.
No.
But in Washington, D.C., really, I wasn't just raised there. It informed me. It was Chocolate City. It was a city full of Black leadership, Black imagination, Black art, Black fashion, Black life. Everyone, whether it was your doctor or the person that delivered the mail, you could live and see Black leadership. And you could see the expansion of Black life and particularly Black professional life.
Yeah.
So that's very critical to my makeup.
Yeah.
And then also Duke Ellington School of the Arts is a gem of an institution where it poured not only love into me, but worth and self-esteem.
Self-esteem.
And as artists, we were encouraged. We were told we were, if not as good, but better than others, because we knew Shakespeare and we knew our culture. We studied, European classics, but also African American classics, African American literature, African American culture, African culture. So we were very well equipped to compete as artists, but we were also, and this is to their brilliance, they armed us with confidence and pride in our culture.
Yeah, which is hard to find these days.
Yeah, and it's a critical difference, particularly when you are, talented or smart, and you have to, and you want to go to one of those institutions, and you want to go to, I got into a very prestigious acting conservatory, and I did not feel less than, even though I was the only black person. They didn't know I was black, because everyone knows I'm light-skinned, like super light-skinned. Yeah. And back then, it was, it was the 80s, and I was dressing very kind of new wave, and I had finger waves, blonde finger waves, kind of like Missy, and I wore red lipstick, and I shaved my eyebrows off.
Right.
So they didn't know what I was.
They didn't know what box to put you in.
I made a reference that I was black, and they did not know. And it was actually, that was the first encounter with racism, because I was at the conservatory, and I was given very challenging roles. I was given a role to be Henry, to be in, to be a woman and play Henry.
Henry, yeah. In a Shakespeare.
It was a monologue. It was a scene study class. And then when they discovered I was black, my next assignment was Mama from Raisin in the Sun. Now,
interesting.
Lorraine Hansberry is brilliant. I realized then that's probably the only reference of any play by any black person they had. And in keeping with the way that the conservatory worked, you would have given Mama to a white male to stretch him.
Right.
But it was immediately, once they knew I was black, they found the only black play they had and gave me the Mama role. And so that's when I was like, oh, wow.
This is what
and
this
then
is.
I also realized, I looked at my curriculum, not one, I don't even know if we really dealt with any women, but no authors of color, whether it was in acting or in literature, like they just did not deal with our language and our culture. Yeah. And it was the most expensive school in the country. So you're paying for this education that is so limited.
And incomplete.
And that's when it dawned on me as a student, oh, we're learning what they want us to learn.
Yes.
And
that's pervasive.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So then after your studies, and you had actually like a triple education, right? You were armed with the European studies, with African American studies, and then there was the reality of the studies of life, right? So after that, you're armed with all of this, and you decide to go into fashion, right? So what is it about fashion that excited you or motivated you and made you choose to go into that?
So I also landed in New York City in the early 80s as a teen. I went to college relatively early. And when I hit Washington Square Park, hip hop was hitting at the same time. Yeah. And so the city itself was so inspiring. There was just fashion everywhere. Every avenue was a runway, whether it was Madison Avenue, it was couture, whether it was downtown, it was fashion. But particularly the street fashion was so exciting to me. And also my aunt was a fashion stylist, and she worked with Richard Avedon, and she worked at Vogue, and she was my first mentor. Yes. And so I'd always been obsessed with fashion. And that was one of the things also at Duke Ellington. We had a fashion department, and we twirled on the runway.
Oh, nice.
And so I was able to kind of, really explore fashion and theater. And I found that there was a real relationship between fashion and art, fashion and theater, fashion and culture. And so when I got to New York, that became not only evident, it was exciting to see how fashion and culture were the relationship between it, and particularly hip hop, because it was so new and so fresh, and people were wearing things here that no one was wearing anywhere else in the world, and and the jewelry and the tracksuits and spinning your hat backwards. And I was like, oh, they put it backwards so they could spray paint, but it looked cool.
Yeah.
Like things were just
out of necessity became an art. It became an art form.
But it was also really, people dressed to impress each other, and they dressed with the intention of being individual. They dressed with the intention of giving you information about themselves. So it was like walking art gallery everywhere, like everywhere.
Yeah.
And so I just was drawn into the theatricality of fashion and the art of it and the expression, because also, particularly for young Black people or young people of color, Latino people, your body is one of the few places where you have some agency. Your body is one of the few places where you're unpoliced. And so that's why there was so much expression through the body and through how you presented.
Right.
So the hair, the clothes, the dance.
And the stories you decide to tell.
Exactly. And so, and it became also a act of defiance, an act of beauty. And because my aunt was working in fashion, I started working as an assistant to help put myself through school. And then just the fashion world just grabbed me, because it was also musically at the time in the city. It was not just hip hop, it was house music. And also like the dance, sort of that dance scene.
That dance holly,
Yeah, and there was a lot of fashion in all of those, buckets, and also punk, so hip hop and punk and house. They
grew up together.
Yeah, and there's an explosion of music and fashion and dance styles. So that became more exciting than these theater institutes that were dry and didn't see me, and all this stuff was happening on the street and in the clubs. Yeah. So that's where I was going.
Yeah. You were going to the club, Michaela.
Yeah, and the streets.
Every night.
I was, and you could, but it really was an exciting, it was an exciting visual explosion. Like you're sitting next to Grace Jones, and and over there's Basquiat, and and everyone's hanging out, and no one's on their phones, right? And so there were no phones to have, and so it was just a fashion show of an explosion of individuality, and I think that's really it. I've been on this journey around identity and individuality. Forever, really. And so the fashion kind of called me. It was very it was explicit in its intention to make you pay attention.
Yes. Now you mentioned your body as being one of the few places where you still have your own agency and your own power over something. Let's talk about your first assignment at Essence. So 1991, your first assignment at Essence Magazine was to style Anita Hill for the very tense, very public, epic testimony. Yeah. So did you feel, at the time, styling her, did you feel a responsibility to style her in such a way that you were making a statement or she was making a statement? And was that the first time that you understood that fashion or how you dress can be political? Well,
it's interesting because I got to Essence because of Susan Taylor. Susan was a flashpoint for me. She became mentor number 2. So my first mentor is Joanne Baker Butler, the stylist. My second was Susan Taylor. I saw Susan Taylor at an event, and she looked exquisite, of course.
Always.
The hat, shoulder pads, out. And it looked like she didn't walk on the ground, like she floated.
Levitated.
She was amazing. And I remember she met me, and I had on some outrageous outfit, and she said, "Who are you?" And I was very proud because I just had this very small photo in Vogue, and I was like, "I'm a stylist in Vogue." And then she asked me, "What are you doing for your people?"
Whoa.
That happened.
Whoa.
2 weeks later, I was working at Essence.
Whoa.
She changed my life with one question.
Oh, my gosh.
Right.
Okay.
And so
oh my God.
I got there, and then it was Anita Hill. And interestingly enough, I wasn't as acutely aware of the impact of what she was going through. And I remember discussing with Susan, the intention was for her to look beautiful.
Yes.
And feel powerful.
Yes.
And so therefore we chose a suit that was fuchsia. It was pink. Because I had some other ones and like really beautiful, navy, like power
navy,
suits.
Great. Yes.
And I remember Susan distinctly saying, but black women look amazing in color. In a way that no one else could, and it gave her energy. And so yes, we were intended to dress her in a particular way, because that back then Essence was the only place that would really make it their business to not just love black women, but to elevate them. And our goal as editors was to have your experience be at Essence like it could be nowhere else. Like, we know you.
Yeah.
And Susan is the real deal. Like, she really loves us.
Yes.
And whether, trends change and styles change, and you have to change with them.
Yes.
But she taught me how to be an editor that loved the reader. Because there's lots of different kinds. Anna Wintour loves the brand, and she is amazing at her job, obviously. But there's different kinds of ways to be an editor.
Absolutely.
And so Susan really poured that into me. No matter what, you love your reader.
Yeah, love your audience.
Yeah, and so I serve black women in different places in different ways. So I was never really brand loyal. Wasn't like, I work for Essence or Vibe or Honey or BET. Because if you look at it, it's all these different platforms.
Yes.
But the person on the other side is the same.
Same.
And even when I had a bout at Vanity Fair, I did almost all the artists that were of color, and I think about black women wherever I am.
Yes.
So if it's at CNN or if it's at Vanity Fair or I'm still talking to us.
Yeah.
No matter where I am. And Susan taught me how to do that.
It's amazing. Now, you talked about people changing and times changing. Do you think much has changed since Anita Hill? Has the culture changed?
Yes and no. Yes, because we have access to each other in a way that we never had before. We have tools in which we can organize and tell our own stories and go directly to folks. And the organizing principle, I think, is the biggest thing, and also helping to craft your own narrative and get stories out in a way that we couldn't before. So it's revolutionary.
Yes.
However,
the undertones.
Yeah, and the institutions are built on patriarchal and white supremacist foundations. So though the outside can change, the foundation is very much the same. And chipping away and undoing foundations are very, 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 very difficult and take generations. And to be honest, at this point, I'm less interested in undoing institutions and building new ones.
Yeah.
And I feel like the younger generation of women, particularly women of color, are into the business of building something new and understanding, I'm not going to undo the White House. Look at the trash that we're dealing with. The fact that could happen made it clear, and particularly clear to others, white liberals. A lot of us, who've been doing this work have understood how insidious and how baked into this culture the notions of supremacy and patriarchy are, to the deaf, even the most the earnest.
Yeah.
We love everybody, as Mariah says, but they didn't really.
Well, we don't love everyone's thoughts and ideas.
Yeah, and they didn't know. They really were ignorant to how insidious it was, because they have been protected. When you never really have to struggle through patriarchy or racism or gender politics to have success, you don't know.
Yes.
And you're hearing women, and you're hearing women of color tell you over and over again, and organize for you over and over again, and do the labor of this country, and it still doesn't. I think this administration is the first time it's actually hit others. We knew, we've been doing the work. We've been, so I'm feeling optimistic. I'm only feeling optimistic because it's 2020, but I'm feeling optimistic.
Okay, that's good. I love the idea of creating your own culture. And in a way, what you just described is a form of privilege, isn't it? It's like benighted bliss. Like you don't know about other people's struggles, so it doesn't really affect you the same way. So I think it becomes vitally important to create another culture that is going to just have to get along, alongside the current culture. But in creating a new culture, what are the types of conversations that we should be having as women of color with each other? And also, what are the types of conversations we should be having with other people, with men?
Well, I think we're doing it right now. And particularly since this administration, doing massive movements and marches are not a good strategy because we're not safe. So we have,
And maybe not even heard.
yeah, and literally not safe, because if you saw people pointing guns at folks in Ferguson during an Obama administration, during a Trump administration, they will pull the trigger. And we know that.
Yeah.
People as organized, and I don't consider myself an organizer like Patrice and Alicia, and there's some people that's what they're brilliant at. But it's more about having more intimate conversations,
Yes.
more consistent intimate conversations with each other
Yes.
here, like this,
Yes.
at dinner tables, having small groups, activating your community. It's much more local where we should work, because also you can see success there.
Yes.
It's very difficult to look like you're going to, take down the White House or unseat the Senate, but you can change your, council people and people whose job it is to send your neighbor's children to jail. Like, those are small but very
Very vital
impactful.
steps.
Yeah, so I think to get more aware of your local politics and your local politicians, that's really impactful. Like,
Yes.
it's not a small thing.
It's not a small thing.
It's just targeted.
Exactly.
And I think in terms of having conversations outside, like with our, non-people of color family or men, it's tricky. I think we have to try to meet people where they're at. I think for Black women who do have a little bit of privilege and have a little bit of patience, perhaps we need to take on a little more. But, listen, there's a part of me that's really, I'm tired of doing the work. I'm tired of watching us do the work. I'm tired of watching Black women do the labor for white women that's a whole nother podcast. For men, because it's just like how we raise children. They learn and grow by making their mistake and learning from it and gaining courage and knowledge. And so I feel like I don't know what we can do. We can lead people to really good books. We can, but I feel like they have to want to do the work.
It has to be an ongoing conversation.
It does.
Yeah.
And, it's a tough history.
It is.
There's a lot of reckoning. There's a lot of ancestral reckoning to do. And though there's still so much poverty and so much, we're in cages, literally. And however, our ancestors, we have pride. Yeah. We have a lot of pride,
Yeah.
in that we have this kind of resilience and that we're still here and that Black women are making it into spaces that never intended for us to be alive, let alone be leaders. So we have all this pride.
Yeah.
And maybe encouragement from that. I do not think in any way that makes it I don't want to in any way discount how difficult it is and how much injustice. Like, there's been very little justice. There is, but I wouldn't want to be anything else. I wouldn't want to have to really grapple with the history of how this country was built on genocide and enslavement. Like, you stole land and stole labor and caused unthinkable pain and brutality, and those are your ancestors, and y'all got to deal with that. And
the energy remains. I mean, it's just throughout generations.
And it's gone unchanged.
Sides.
And it seemed, and that's what this administration is showing, the naivete that somehow because a bill was passed, that mentality just disappeared.
Yeah.
You know, there were people alive today that went to lynchings as entertainment and ate cold fried chicken while they watched people hang. Those people are alive. Those people had children. Those people elect people. 53 million people in this country elected a chaotic idiot racist.
Are there even any more words? I mean,
53 million. He's not the problem.
No,
he's one psychopath
symptom.
But 53 million people voted for him, and you don't know who they are.
Right.
Although
Cambridge Analytica knows who they are.
They sure do. So anyway,
that's another podcast.
There's so many podcasts.
There's so many podcast topics.
So many, yeah.
Okay, so the topic of this podcast is...
I love that you said transformation earlier.
Yeah, dedicated to transformation.
That's
right?
great.
Which is what
we need.
Always do and what we need.
Yes.
But specifically about, your image being your identity, and talking about, race and gender in this current paradigm of culture that we have. So we all know the relationship between aging and beauty. We all know.
Do we though?
So that's my question. Do we really know? And in this sort of new culture that hopefully is being created, what exactly is the connection between beauty and identity, or age and identity?
So, that's where I'm at right now.
I know.
Like, I'm literally at the crossroads of those spaces.
Yes.
And what does it look like to age honestly?
Yeah.
And to age with courage.
And grace.
And, and the thing is, I feel less that I want to age with grace and more like I want to age with gangster. Like, I don't...
Like fierceness.
Yeah, like part of...
Ferocity.
Because and why I say that is because part of, I feel that part of the push culturally is for us to disappear and to just bow out gracefully. Yeah, and just don't make any moves, don't make any waves, don't make any noise, because we make everyone nervous. We make younger women nervous because they're looking at one day, that's going to be me, and that's going to be my neck. And then, we make men nervous because they start to see their own mothers or selves, and they feel older and less sexy around us because we make everyone nervous.
Oh, a lovely position to be in.
But we're at the top of our game. Like, I've never felt more confident, and it's when all your experience and knowledge are right there. Just like men peak. You see many men, they peak in their 50s and 60s and whatever. You see them running for president. Women do too, because it's just accumulation of experience and jobs and having children or whatever, your life.
Yeah.
You've gained a life.
Yes.
And so it's diabolical to put women in a position where as soon as you've gained enough life to walk through this world with some confidence and gangster, you're asked to disappear. And so that is what and also I don't want to be the next generation that passively doesn't communicate with the women behind us.
Yes.
With my children, or talk about, I went through the change.
Yes.
What our generation.
We've been changing all our lives.
I know. Our mothers didn't talk about menopause.
Right.
They don't talk about aging. Like, to be made to feel shameful about life itself is criminal.
And men don't talk about andropause. They don't talk about their version of menopause.
They do not.
Right?
And so what is the alternative? If we're not aging, what are we doing?
Right.
We're gone.
We're stagnant, right.
Right. So but it is really...
It's intricate.
Yeah, and it's challenging because you're having a new relationship with yourself.
Absolutely.
Because I don't know about you, but I felt really unchanged from about 25 to 45. I had a pregnancy.
Yes.
That was the only like big thing.
Yes.
But my responses were the same. My size was generally the same. My sleep cycle, everything was for like 20 solid years.
Yes.
I was kind of the same physical person.
Yes.
And then I
something
wasn't.
happened. Right.
Then my eyes. Listen. When my eyes, I used to use Lancome Hypnose mascara.
Yes.
Religiously.
Yes.
I used it forever, for
Yes.
years.
Yes.
Right. So I switched one day because I was getting some samples, Shirley, I literally thought, because I was using mascara, it was flaking and getting in my eyes, and that's why I'm at the restaurant like this. I thought it was my mascara
That got in the way of your vision.
And I remember I went to an appointment, and to a doctor's appointment. He said, "How old are you?" And I'm like, 45. And he said, "Oh, that's it." I'm like, "What do you mean that's it?" He said, "You're aging, darling," or something like that.
Oh, yeah.
And I was just like,
What are you talking about?
Why didn't anyone talk to me about this?
Right.
I feel like a crazy person going like, "Oh my God, my
Change my mascara.
That's how little I knew. Anyway, so that was, and that was the first sign, like my eyes, and then, the slowing down, and then the thyroid thing that we talked about.
Yeah.
Because also sometimes what conditions can happen at that time. So you also were thinking, "Oh my God, I'm actually falling apart." And then you become that old lady, you become what you saw your aunties, like they went from being these fly ladies to like all of a sudden they're wearing, I don't know, like those square clothes,
the moo-moos or the
and not even fly moo-moo, because I love a good moo-moo, but
a good moo-moo.
But you know what I mean?
I do.
And they start that track of taking pills. And it's one or the other, like those the diabetes things
It's
start
like
to
this
come.
cascade.
Yeah, and they start around this age, and now I understand why, because like actual things are happening, and there's a low grade depression that could happen. You have to have a very dynamic relationship with yourself, because things are. It's like being
No worries.
It's like being a teenager in reverse.
Yes.
When you're a teenager, things are just happening. What's that pimple? What's that thing? Why do I want to sleep?
Yes.
It feels kind of like that, but it's going another way. But you have to be alert and honest, and also kind with yourself.
Yes.
Hard.
Yeah.
But it's so the esteem that you get when you're like, no, I am not going down like that. There are things I can do. I'm not helpless in this gravity pull, and the looking at the mirror going, who is that? And there's
this
another
distribution of weight.
Yeah. And so I'm in that right now, and I do, and it's so. Let me tell you something though. Particularly with younger women, when you tell them that you're in, like, how old you are and maybe you look great or whatever, it's so encouraging, and that you're also very open about what's happening.
Of course.
They are also very grateful.
Yes.
And like I have an 81-year-old mother who is fly.
Yes, I'm sure.
And she is so, inspiring to me. Or you watch, Cicely Tyson at 94 working and bouncing around.
Yes.
And you're going, what's her? I just saw her. Oh my God. Help me out. What's love got to do with it? Angela Bassett.
Yeah, Angela Bassett.
I saw Angela Bassett like at Black Girls Rock, and she had on this backless jumpsuit.
Yes, amazing.
It's inspiring.
Amazing.
I'm not that inspired by, who's got a great body? Sierra. Like, she's great.
Yes.
I look great at 30-some too. No, I mean, but
yes.
She works hard, like no
Absolutely.
shade. It's gorgeous.
Yes.
But for Angela to hold it together like
and
that
beyond,
takes work. And I mean, there's DNA certainly,
yes.
and commitment. However, we can be in inspiring spaces if we choose. And so part of, I think, just for me, just in living is where are the possibilities where you are now? Where are the possibilities to grow, be courageous, and inspire in your 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s? And so for me to now be in my 50s, in that halfway point.
Yes.
You know, I'm in the middle passage, right? And so how can I be inspiring? What can I find? What's the possibility in this moment? And then expand that. That's the goal. So I do feel it's very important to be out about, and I'm watching more of my friends and colleagues like on Instagram, that a lot of people are talking about being in their 50s in a very open and public way, and going like, and so I think we're moving the needle forward, because also the 20-somethings and the 30-somethings and the 40-somethings, 40s were so great. 40s are great. For them to see, like, life goes on.
And on and on.
And on and on and on.
Yeah, so. Absolutely. Well, I love that. And I think that's a good place, you know, to sort of switch over the topic a little bit, but on just ending on possibility and choice. I mean, both of those inspire hope. And I think it's a wonderful place not only to leave off, but also to start off. So thank you for listening to part 1 of the Forever Fab podcast interview with Michaela Angela Davis. And we'll be back for part 2. Stay tuned.
You've just listened to part 1 of Forever Fab podcast. Please stay tuned for part 2, coming up next.